or an early piece of gingerbread. But no. Finally, she confided that she was eager for the parties to go well, for her husband Smithfield's sake. It had been Smithfield who'd had the idea that they combined their holiday parties with a celebration of his hobby. "And what is his hobby?" I'd asked with trepidation, fearing something to do with snakes. "Why, darling," Hermie had replied, "it's map collecting." I'd almost choked as I imagined having to make a cake in the shape of North America, complete with squiggly lines for the rivers. But Hermie didn't mention a cake. I smiled and reminded myself that I'd had plenty of practice dealing with ultra-wealthy people and their eccentricities, so if the MacArthurs wanted to haul out their Rand McNallys along with some mincemeat pies, who was I to complain? I did tell Hermie that the one famous map of Aspen Meadow, with its maze of dirt and paved roads winding through the mountains, was "You used-to couldn't get there from here." She'd frowned. She said she was hoping I could do some reading on map collecting before I came, in case Smithfield wanted to help me with a slide, and I needed to reach for South Africa and not the South Bronx. Plus, Hermie went on, there would be at least 2 map dealers at the party, and one of them, Drew Wellington, was a former district attorney. Did I know Drew Wellington, she asked. Yes, I said, after a pause. I knew Mr. Wellington. Hermie also wanted a touch of elegance, she said, and shook a ringed forefinger with a diamond the size of one of Arch's old marbles. Elegant was my middle name, I replied cheerily. Of course it wasn't, and my business, Goldilocks Catering, where everything is just right, could be as low down as a cowboy barbecue. But Hermie had seemed satisfied. So there I was on November 25th, tootling along Regal Road, the curving mountain byway that led past one of Arch's favorite snowboarding places and ended at the entrance to Regal Ridge Country Club, a relatively new fancy development built after Aspen Meadow Country Club had filled up. Hermie and I were set to make decisions on the menus for a dinner for 8 to be held on Saturday, December 16th, and a luncheon on Monday the 18th. Elegant meant we weren't just talking soup to nuts. I was offering her crab dumplings and fresh herb broth to precede her first event, a curry dinner that would conclude with lime, not mincemeat, thank goodness, pie. For the Monday lunch, Hermie had asked for lamb and potatoes. I was going to propose lamb chops, persillade, and potatoes au gratin. The potatoes would be made memorable with fresh sage and caramelized onions. After we'd decided on the food, we'd hammer out the details of a preliminary contract. I would see how the MacArthur's kitchen, dining, and living areas were set up. Then, most importantly from my point of view, Hermie would write a check for a down payment. Accelerating up a steep hill, I felt fat. An expression of Arch's that he now told me was so over. Fat meant happy, not overweight, although I probably was that, too. I had a reason to feel good. The upcoming slew of holiday parties had, for the most part, been planned and paid for. 6 weeks prior to the holidays was my cutoff date for booking events, but Hermie MacArthur had begged so earnestly that I'd agreed to take her on. For the rest of the affairs I was catering, the food had been ordered and the servers lined up, and I was especially happy that my event center by Aspen Meadow Lake had been cleaned and professionally decorated. Artificial trees and thousands of tiny colored lights had transformed the place into the proverbial winter wonderland. I'd offered the center to Hermie, but she wanted to have their parties in their home. They had more maps than I had twinkling lights, she explained, and if they tried to move them, they had insurance concerns. I said I understood. Their residence wasn't a pretend mansion, I'd been told by Marla Corman, my best friend, and the other ex-wife of our now-deceased ex-husband. It was an estate. In fact, Marla had said the MacArthur's home was an exceptionally fortified palace that had been built on one of the outcroppings of the Regal Ridge itself. According to Marla, the mansion commanded an impressive view of Denver, 40 miles to the east, but the back side of the house perched on a sheer cliff overlooking a 1,000-foot drop. It wasn't a place where herds of elk would ruin your garden, that was certain. All this was okay with me, except for one thing: how you got to the MacArthur's house. After you pass the snowboard area.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.